I am rolling on my end.
We're rolling on here. Go for it, Kat.
Okay, super. I'm really glad to chat with you. So thanks for taking the time. So I was listening to your podcast interview with Anna Maria Tremonti, and you spoke about how overconfidence can be more dangerous than incompetence. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that.
So overconfidence is more dangerous than incompetence because overconfidence is a disease of experts. Incompetence is a disease of idiots. And idiots don't get that far in the world. People who are genuinely good at what they do get far. They rise to positions of leadership. And their particular problem is that sometimes they grow to have an estimation of their abilities that is greater than their actual abilities. And that's a very serious problem. And that leads to mistakes every bit as consequential, if not more consequential, than the mistakes of incompetence.
Let's say you have an overconfident boss. Is there a way to tactfully manage that situation?
Is there a tactful way to inform your boss that you think your boss is overconfident? That's a very good question. I suppose it depends on your boss. You know, the more dangerous overconfidence gets, the less likely your boss is to listen to anyone else. That's what it means to be overconfident, right? The best thing to do about that is just to make sure that organizations have systems where people get feedback and where there is a diverse group of voices making decisions. That's the best way to safeguard. What you don't want is someone off on their own, not getting any kind of feedback and just kind of floating on a cloud of their own ego. It's a lot harder to be overconfident when I have to sit down with a group of people who have very different perspectives and justify what I'm doing. You see this in the world of the military all the time, that one of the reasons we have, for example, in the United States, a Joint Chiefs of Staff, is you want to have a room full of people who make the most consequential decisions. You don't want one person running off on their own thinking they can solve it all.
I really liked when you talked about curiosity as an evolutionary state. If we accept that to be true, then do you think curiosity can be cultivated? And then if you do think it can be, how?
It absolutely can be cultivated because all of us are born curious. That's the fundamental condition, human condition. That's how we learn. That's how we make it through to adulthood. I remember listening to this linguist the other day. Why is it the case that certain languages are really, really difficult to master? And the answer is because they're mastered by children. And children are indifferent to how hard something is. Their minds are wide open. They're racing at 100 miles an hour. They're capable of absorbing all kinds of complexity, and they're massively curious. They want to learn a new language. And so the difficulty of it doesn't faze them in any way. The problem is we lose that ability in many ways as we get older. We kind of set that aside, our curiosity aside. So the question is, how can you stay young longer is really the issue. And I think you do that by keeping moving. You know, the thing that sparks curiosity is always novelty. When we encounter something new, then the child in us resurfaces. So for example, I try to structure my life so I'm systematically being exposed to new things all the time. That means I try and read things outside of my ideological comfort zone. I try and eat at restaurants that don't sound like a good idea. I try and strike up conversations with people who I might not think I would have an interesting conversation with. These are all kind of habits that I think we have to cultivate if we want to stay curious. Curiosity will wither if it's not regularly watered and fed.
In talking to strangers, you talk about how we're not necessarily that great at talking to strangers. You know, the book was published in September, and so much has happened. We're in sort of a different climate now. How can we become better at talking to strangers in a way that might help this current environment?
The point of my book was that we need patience and humility when it comes to dealing with strangers. We need to understand that we're not always right, and we have to understand that there is no reason to be in a hurry to jump to a conclusion about someone we don't know. In order to listen to someone, carefully and with empathy, you must be curious about them, right? You must understand that there's someone worth listening to and open your mind to them. We've just been through another one of these incredibly wrenching moments in American history where we have these massively traumatic encounters between African Americans and the police. And there's a lot of racism going on. There's also a lot of lack of curiosity. The police are jumping to conclusions about people without listening to them first. Well, a lot of it is being willing to entertain a variety of different explanations for what you're seeing. Somebody is rude to you. That could mean you did something you don't understand that prompted them. It could mean they're rude. It could mean they're having a terrible day that has nothing to do with you. It could mean they just have bad manners. It could mean they're on the spectrum and what you're reading as rudeness is not rudeness at all, but rather someone who just has a different set of social gifts. I mean, I could go on. It's that idea of the world is a lot more complex than we imagine in our first impressions. And so it's developing a habit of withholding judgment until you have exhausted all possible or all relevant explanations. We can't have a society where we dismiss the ideas of other people without even bothering to find out what they are first. It's the simplest lesson in the world, but it is so routinely violated, particularly in a world where half the communication we're doing is in these places like Twitter, where they're designed for misunderstanding, right? If you place a limit on how much people can communicate, you are going by definition to get misunderstandings, right? So somehow we forget that and we start raging at each other on social media without understanding it's possibly the worst place imaginable for understanding another.
And I'm wondering if you have any guidance as to how to approach conversations about race and inequality with your loved ones and not strangers.
If you're discussing something in a serious way for the first time with a loved one, you are talking to a stranger, right? You're talking to a part of your parents that you haven't encountered before. So I think the same rules apply, which is take the time to understand why they have the positions they have and be gentle. Very often the issue isn't can you change someone's mind, but how long are you willing to wait for their mind to change? There are lots of people in America who, in the 1960s, felt very strongly that black people should never marry white people. They changed their mind. In some cases it took many years, but they did. Most of them did. Very few people in America think that's a problem today. I think a lot of this just has to do with patience, that on these kind of cutting edge issues, we have to give people the opportunity to learn more and see where they land after they've learned more, and be willing to wait not a month, but 10 years in some cases. There's no hurry.